Well, John and Christine, thank you so much for that introduction, but really thank you for your leadership in making this possible. Who would have thought 5:30 on a Friday night and we'd pack a hall at Ryerson to talk about LGBTQ issues and questions, and thank you all of you for making time to be with here tonight. We're excited about this debate. We're thankful to both Olivia and to John for being here and taking part in this discussion about issues for our community. To inform the questions for today's debate, proudTOvote canvassed widely for your suggestions on our website, the Facebook, and Twitter. The response was overwhelming. Today's questions are drawn from all of those suggestions. proudTOvote also asked for questions from the community, and we have video recordings of those questions, which we will present during the course of the event today. 2 questions will be taken, as John said, from you at random. We only have time for 2, unfortunately. You've got tickets. He'll draw those tickets in a little bit later on. You can flag them down if you haven't got one of those raffle tickets quite yet. One thing we think about at these debates is that, the opening statements are kind of crummy. And they're usually cliche-matics, written by campaign staffers who are overtired and don't have enough to do. I only say that because I've written a lot of those crummy opening statements myself. So this time we decided to give each candidate a question, and we provided that question in advance. So they will have that question, and they'll have 2 minutes to answer that, and then we'll go into the questions for the debate itself. The questions in the debate, the format will be the same. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer in rotating order, and that will be followed by 2.5 minutes of open debate. A coin toss decided the order of the candidates' responses today, and both Mr. Tory and Ms. Chow have been provided with all of the rules in advance and have agreed to abide by my decisions as the moderator, something they may well regret. So again, to both of you, thank you very much for being here. And here's the opening question. John and Olivia, one of you is likely about to become the leader of Canada's largest city. And as you know, Torontonians take great pride in our diversity. In fact, we also think of ourselves as leaders in LGBTQ inclusion. But many other cities around the world make great efforts to embrace their LGBT communities and consider themselves leader in our inclusion. Of those, which city do you admire the most, and what could we learn from them? John, you're first.
Are we to stand or sit?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Well, I'll stand for the opening statement and then maybe sit for the questions as we're having a conversation.
Perfect.
And thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for coming tonight, and I'm delighted to be here. And I'm going to end up my answer to the question naming a city because it said we had to name one. But I want to sort of go through a bit of the process that I went through in terms of trying to figure out what to name. I'm not sure, frankly, that overall anybody is doing dramatically better than we are, and that's a statement that we can take great pride in. Some are further advanced on some ideas than others and made my list accordingly. I think we are making progress here on tangible inclusion, which is what I'm talking about. And I think when it comes to attitude-wise, I'm not sure there's anybody doing any better than we are. But let me just talk about some of the ones that I sort of put on the list, and I get to the sort of person that became my number one answer at the end. I think of Berlin, where they have elected a gay mayor who remains in office. They have an LGBT museum. They have really committed themselves in many different ways to make the list, and I think it is something where they have a genuine culture of inclusion in many different respects. Of course, they have Europe's biggest pride parade each year. Today's debate aside, we had earlier on today, I would have included Tel Aviv solely almost on the basis that their love parade is something that they put on surrounded by cities where such a parade would never happen, couldn't happen, and the pride and enthusiasm with which they put on that parade is something that indicates a kind of an attitude there about inclusion that I think is important and should be emulated. Seattle isn't talked about as much nowadays, but I think it is a city that has done a huge amount when it comes to creating an accepting, inclusive community, embracing, whether it's through assistance with adoptions. It has the highest percentage of same-sex marriages in the United States of any city, helping support for gay families with adoptions, accepting neighborhoods. It's a city to be admired in many respects, but in the end, I would name San Francisco. And it isn't just about the history. The history is obviously great and rich and long, and it extends across many different fronts. But it is because if you look, they have the largest gay archives. They have a whole lot of different things that represent an absolute commitment to the inclusion. But they also have done something that I think is really important, which is they have started to look after seniors in the LGBTQ community and do a lot of planning through advocacy groups and otherwise to make sure seniors are looked after. And I think it's something very few cities are doing, and I put them at the top of my list for that reason, plus the rich history.
Thank you. Your turn, Olivia.
Okay. I haven't traveled a lot, but hearing from friends who have traveled a lot, many visitors to Toronto, about some of the great cities for the LGBTQ community. Amsterdam, the world's most liberal city, yes, 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 where homosexuality was decriminalized in 1800s. Wow. Berlin, with its parties, considered the Europe's gayest capital. Right? San Francisco and New York, London, Barcelona, Madrid, all great cities with much to admire. But I need to come back to, in terms of leadership, Toronto, and how much we have achieved together. So I thought we would look at some of those key areas that we spoke out together when the gay man in 1985, Ken Seller, was murdered and gay bashed to death in Hyde Park by students, youth. We were able to, at one of the first school board, to say that we need to talk about anti-homophobic curriculum, training the teachers. This is 85, 86. And that was, those are pretty tough years, but we started that. And then here in Toronto, we managed to get in North America the first school board to have condoms in schools. That's pretty cool, I think. And at the heights, yes, it was the first. And then, of course, I don't see Brent Hawks there. I saw him outside. That we were together, all of us, some of us, were there to witness his bulletproof vest and had the first gay marriage. And those are very special moments that I think we all shared together. But other than learning from global capitals, not just the LGBT community, they have first-class transit, they have great district for street life, pedestrian areas, squares, cafes, parks, vibrancy, community, where people can connect and cruise. And that's important. So that's the real key to the community. We're like here in Church Street, and that's my definition of a very successful city, being able to cruise.
Our next question comes from Brent Hawks, who is here somewhere. We well know in our community that the fight for HIV and AIDS continues, and it's far from over. And we also know that the funding for that fight continues to be under pressure. For example, the Hassle-Free Clinic often has a 2-week wait list for HIV/AIDS screening appointments. How would you ensure that funding for HIV/AIDS programming will continue to exist and continue to increase where appropriate? Olivia?
I will protect the overall grants budget. That is close to $50 million in the city. And a portion of it is through the Toronto Board of Health. And I think it's very important to protect it and not, especially with funding grants, to protect it so that it's not determined by politics. Because I've seen AIDS funding, arts funding through the years that politics got involved and got into a huge, huge debate and sometimes been cut. I recalled when I was a Metro councillor that this wasn't AIDS grants, but it was the grants to two organizations, Buddies in Bad Times and the Inside Out Collective. Buddies was able to save the grants, but the Inside Out was not. And that's why we moved the funds, arts fund, into that's an ending, right? It's 1 minute, not 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. So I think it's important to protect it, and best way is to have it recommended by expert and not being influenced by too much politics.
We are dealing with healthcare issues here and tests people need for healthcare and not a hairstyling appointment or anything like that. And I think there should be a standard set. I don't know enough, frankly, to know when you talk about a 2-week delay if that's something that is critical. But if it is, and I assume from the nature of the question that that's a critical factor, that it should be much sooner than 2 weeks, then we should be funding these clinics to be able to deliver that test in less than that period of time. And if that means an increase in the funding, then they should have the increase in the funding. I think that these, the grants under which some of these things fall are some of the best investments we make. You will not find me as somebody who's going to be going after those grants or looking at those as a place where we're going to somehow economize in government. It is some of the best investments we make, and this is healthcare. And when it comes to healthcare, we set standards. We set standards that we try to meet. If we've done it for hips and knees and various other things, then we can do it for people who are facing much more life-threatening medical conditions.
And then there's
So now we have 2.5 minutes for a free-for-all debate between both of you, and however you would like to take that question, but I think generally we're interested in your views on support for the HIV/AIDS community.
Mm-hmm. I believe that the grant should rise with the rate of inflation. It's very important. And I remember the start of the AIDS Defense Plan in the late 80s. And because of that, the Toronto inflection rate is actually lower than other cities. And so it's very important that the grants rise with inflation. And that's one area that we need to absolutely protect.
I don't have a particular issue with the notion of grants rising by the rate of inflation, but I think the question of need in the sense of if it's a medical thing, for example, a medical condition, I mean, I do view that kind of a grant under the public health portion as being different, because I do think we have to have an absolute obligation to make sure that we look after those things within some kind of a standard as to when people need to have those tests. And if it's within days as opposed to weeks, then we should be achieving that standard, and frankly, inflation should have nothing to do with it. We should be giving a 10% increase, if necessary, to make sure we meet the standard. I just think that's the proper way to run it, especially when it comes to healthcare. Otherwise, I think you should be looking at these grants one each and taking into account the ones that might require some bigger increase because of a medical aspect or some other thing, as opposed to those that may not.
No argument from me. I have no argument about that at all. And I think by and large, the grants program has been running well, but there probably needs to be some fine-tuning.
Okay. We'll go on to the next question. As a community, we've come a long way since the bathhouse raids of the 80s and demonstrably made some strides towards equality. But, of course, challenges remain. Many in our community still feel vulnerable, excluded. Our youth are particularly affected. 1 in 4 homeless youth in Toronto identify as LGBT. And our kids are continuing to kill themselves at an alarming rate. As mayor, how would you spearhead LGBT-specific initiatives, whether it be shelters, community centers, schools, sports, but how would you look at specific initiatives to address the needs of that community? John, you're first.
Well, I guess the first thing I would do, and is to ask the community to spearhead it to me, because in the end, it's hard for me to know which ones are the most important priorities. I mean, I start from the premise, in all honesty, that if it comes to the taxpayers' money or the government's money, you can't do everything. And I see with great heart, for example, that when it comes to this proposed recreation center, there's been a huge private donor, I think, that's kind of stepped forward and said that person would help to make this happen. And I think that's important. But I think when it comes to the scarce government resources, the community has to tell me, as the mayor, which of these are the most important. It strikes me, and that's one of the reasons I did pick San Francisco on my list, is that they're doing the work now of something that all of us would probably agree is right up at the top of the list, both the older people who are isolated and displaced and homeless and alone, and the younger people who are. And we've begun to address the younger people. I'm not sure we've done much in Toronto about the older people. I would say the medical side of this. But then when it comes to sports and recreation, I'm thrilled to say, well, we can do something as a city matching a private initiative that's already been undertaken. But I turn to the community to get the priority list. Can't do it all.
I know the community well enough to know that homeless youth is very, very vulnerable because they need shelter support. And I will work with Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam to make sure that there's a homeless shelter for young people. And I know, yes, that is pretty important. I also know that the trans community are most at risk, and they are in need of support. That's why I think they should have a space. They should, I think they were looking at some kind of space, and it's important that the various activities that they propose, that we support them. I spoke out very clearly in the House of Commons when I was a member of Parliament to make sure there's a trans right bill, and I will continue to do so as the mayor.
Pick that up wherever you'd like.
Well, I mean, I think it does underline a point we end up discussing often in these debates, which is that it is not fair and it's not appropriate for the city taxpayers, the city government, to accept and take on all of these responsibilities on its own. And that I think it is going to be increasingly important in all of these areas, but also including some of the bigger areas, if I can call it that, bigger in terms of funding requirements, that we have the kinds of reliable partnerships, stable, consistent partnerships, longer-term partnerships with the other governments in all of these areas. So whether it's on the healthcare side, we talked about earlier, whether it's support for seniors and young people, or whether it's other things that we might discuss tonight. And I have very much focused people's minds, because I think it's an appropriate question they should focus on, as to which candidate they think is best going to be able to achieve results from both of those governments, the Harper majority Conservative government in Ottawa and the Wynne majority Liberal government at Queen's Park, because they've got the serious money to finance a lot of these things and should have the responsibility. It's not just a matter of who has the money, it's who has the responsibility.
Let me give you... Now, I actually don't quite agree that we need to wait for others to start. I'll give you one concrete example. In the 90s, my office helped start the Gay and Lesbian Youth Hotline, because there was no such thing at the time, and the community came together and said they need something to get started. Administratively, my office provided the phones and the space for them to get started, and then after a year or so, we did some fundraising, did a banquet, etc. They were able to stand on their own, and then they were able to find space. And sure enough, later on, United Way and then the other government came on board. I think it's important that when there's a need, we step up, work with the community, and say that, yeah, we're behind you. It doesn't matter which level of government. Let's take the leadership position, get it started. If it's right, if it's just, other levels of government will come in. It's not about relationship, it's about vision, it's about doing the right thing, and also the key component is to work with the community, build a strong movement, then the funding will come. That's the way I have always worked.
Only to say, Jamie, I don't disagree with that, but if you want to scale these things, if you want to scale it when you start talking about help for youth or for seniors and the number of people that are going to be affected by that, we're going to need the other governments. That's just a statement of fact. There isn't enough money at the city level to do that.
Thank you both. We're now going to take our first question submitted by video.
Hello, my name is Earl, and I'm 74 years old now. In the coming years, we could expect an increasing number of LGBT seniors like myself. Finding acceptance for us in assisted living facilities will be a challenge for everyone, and many LGBTQ seniors are going to be forced back into the closet, which is an unfortunate thing. I'd like you to each share your ideas on how you would proactively address the issues facing we seniors.
Olivia.
1 minute, not long enough, okay.
But then you got 2.5 after
okay,
that,
all right.
so.
2 things I would do for seniors. 1, we need to build affordable housing because a lot of seniors need affordable housing, right? Yes, they need it. We have 95,000 households waiting for affordable housing. 30% of them are seniors. Let's do something. Let's build. In my plan is building 15,000 units of affordable housing. And the city has 10 nursing homes. And there's no reason why we can't work with the provincial government to build a few more. We need more nursing homes right here in Toronto. Let's work with the community and perhaps new ones or the existing ones. Some of it can be for the LGBTQ community. And that's a good way to go to make sure that there's assisted living, there's nursing home care for seniors because they serve us well. Let's make sure they're retired in dignity.
John.
I was reading and trying to answer that first question about cities, about San Francisco and what they've done there. And it's interesting because they have an organization called Open House there, which is actually an organization that came from the community to advocate on behalf of seniors in particular in the LGBTQ community. I'd like to see it perhaps not wait for that to happen. I'm not aware that it's happened here, and I would like to see it maybe start in the mayor's office with something we could do to say, fine, let's have the mayor's office sponsor and encourage the creation of an organization like Open House to advocate on behalf of seniors, because I think the issues are fairly self-evident. The issues are related to isolation in many different respects and to things, very practical things like housing. And I think that I look at a model. I was pleased to visit down on the Esplanade. I don't remember the name of it. I'm sure Olivia might know, or Jamie. But it's for artists, and it's for sort of retired artists. And it's a model that seems to work quite well. They're talking right now about expanding it, the place that's already there. But I'd like to look at a model like that where we could have a place that is set aside with appropriate government assistance to provide that housing. But I'd like to start with the advocacy inside and have those people advise me from the community.
Mr. Tory was talking about the Performance Art Lodge that I know very well. It's a cooperative. It is a place where mixed income, a lot of very famous artists retired there. And my late husband helped put the funding together to make it possible. And we were at the opening of the Artist Lodge. And right opposite to it is a seniors home and also a cooperative. So that's what building affordable housing can do. And my plan, what I want to do is that if any buildings that are building now, towers, that 20% of the building should be made affordable. And if we can do that, because we're building a lot of condominiums, if 20% of them can be made affordable, then some of the seniors don't have to move out from the village. They can live right in the village and make sure it's affordable. And if you add that with home care, that's the way to go, I think.
I have a slightly different approach, but I think it will produce the same results in terms of increasing the supply of affordable housing, including for seniors, and concepts like the artists' residence that I was speaking about. And that is that I would take existing public lands, and it's not limited to these two examples I give, but it certainly could start with these two. One is the Toronto Parking Authority, where they have successfully shown they can move the parking off surface lots under the ground and put affordable housing on top of it. And of course, the land is already owned by the public, and it will streamline the approval process of that, as well as allow the city to make that contribution. But you then put it out for bid to people to come in and build affordable housing on the express understanding that's what it would be. The second place where you could have some of this land, obviously, is on existing TCHC properties, where they often have quite a large piece of land around existing housing units. And again, you could devote some of that to lower density projects of this kind for affordable housing. And I think it could make a substantial difference, and I think it could be, some of that housing could be dedicated in the way that the artist residence is to people from this community who have those housing needs, seniors who have those housing needs, because I think that's going to be a particularly acute problem in the time ahead.
Let's take another question submitted by video. This one comes from YouTube.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm a first-year media student at Ryerson University. My question for the candidates is, as mayor, how will you promote trans inclusion at City Hall and across Toronto?
I think a lot of it has to do with education and people becoming better informed. I think right now, and I'm being honest as somebody who's not part of myself, I feel like I'm very at home in the LGBTQ community, but I'm not part of it. And I had to sensitize myself and learn, especially as a provincial politician, about some of the particular challenges faced by people in the trans community, and the challenges are considerable. And I think that the only way, I mean, you make the inclusion happen by inviting people in and to become part of the government and to be part of every aspect of what goes on in the city. But I think that inclusion is going to happen beyond what politicians and government people say if we do a much better job of informing the public of the trans community, its very existence, because I think a lot of people are kind of in a way unaware of it, and of some of the particular challenges that are faced by people who are trans, and I think that's how you're going to achieve the inclusion. You're going to do it in government, invite people in yourself, but for the rest of the community, you're going to have to start by informing and educating people, because I think there's a great deal of ignorance and misunderstanding out there, starting with ignorance, and I think then there's, among even some who are informed, there's a lot of misunderstanding.
Olivia.
I think it's important to establish key policy. As you heard earlier, that I spoke several times in the House of Commons on the trans bill. In fact, the protection bill passed the House of Commons twice, and it got killed over at the Senate. So in this country of ours, we still do not have a equal rights bill for trans, or that is included in the Human Rights Code. So I think it's important that the city government make a very clear policy statement. When I was a city councillor, I had students in my office. One of them is George, and then he then became Susan Gapta. I provided support. Yeah, Susan was in my office. Some of you know Susan, yes. I provided support, make sure that there's no discussion about washrooms, because there was a lot of fear, and that we have a very clear policy of no discrimination. And I think we can lead with example by showcasing those that are working at City Hall, that are transgender, that we celebrate their presence at City.
You want to carry on that conversation?
Well, if we can start by having people come out if they are transgender, transsexual, and making sure they have a voice at City Hall, and supporting them. If there is enough numbers, that perhaps there could be an organization in support of them, because it's really important to lead with example, to celebrate, and make sure they have a role to play in city services. And some of the services, is important that we invite the community to come in and say that whether it's shelters, whether all the city services we have, that we strip the transphobia out of the service. And we need to ask the community what are some of the things that are occurring in city services that we can make it better, so that it is not discriminating transgender and transgender people.
I would only say that I think that the transphobia is, I hope it's not too much in the city services, but I think it may be more in the population. And I don't say that as a way of sort of castigating or stereotyping people and their attitudes about these things, but I think there is such a profound lack of understanding and lack of information about the trans community. If you think back, you know, if you think back, I mean, well, it'll be more than 25, we'd now be 50 years ago, the same would be true of the broader LGBTQ community. But it's changed a lot, and it's changed because of initiatives that were taken not just by government and not passing laws, but even by initiatives taken by the private sector, so that inside companies, they had you know, pride groups that were part of that company and were encouraged by the companies and so on. I think we have a huge amount of work to do to increase public information and public understanding of what of who this group of people are and what some of the challenges are they face of various kinds. And I think that has got to be at the cornerstone of this, because otherwise you can pass laws and you can change programs, and those are good things to do, but they're not going to change the fundamental question, which was about inclusion, not just in government or at City Hall, but in society as a whole.
Inclusion is one dimension, but a key element is saying no to discrimination, no to hate, no to bullying, no to harassment, because we have seen far too many examples of that. We've seen the damage and the hurt and the suffering and the oppression from the community, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that they are not being oppressed.
Next question. The next question was submitted online to the proudTOvote website. LGBT newcomers and refugees are a growing part of our Toronto population. Often they come here to flee persecution and may be part of cultures that don't accept homosexuality or queer identities. What are your thoughts on how Toronto can support these newcomers and refugees and encourage them to really flourish here in Toronto? Olivia?
We need to make sure the newcomers come to this country, understand who we are. That when we're talking about diversity, we're not just talking about color, we're talking about sexual orientation also, we're not just talking about gender, and that needs to be discussed, raised, and there are many ways to do it. The City of Toronto have grants programs that fund a lot of organizations that connect with newcomers. And we can make sure that when they are, whether citizenship class, ESL classes, settlement classes, all of that, anti-homophobic message is there. I worked very hard when the Conservative government took out the whole notion in the new citizenship guide, the first version, where as if there was no gay and lesbian history. And I worked hard to say to Jason Kenney at the time that we must put it back in, and we were able to do so at the next printing. So I've done it before, I'll continue to do so.
John.
Again, I come back to this because I just believe in my heart it's so, that the government has its job to do in terms of whether it's putting rules in place or having programs that support people who are newcomers to the country, often as refugees who are LGBTQ or anybody else who comes here in that capacity. But I think in the end, the community has to take some responsibility. And when I say that, I mean it in this context. I look at some of the fantastic work that's being done at MCC, taking on as many refugee, LGBTQ refugees as they possibly can, given the financial resources they have. And I would say that while the government has an important role to play even in supporting those kinds of programs, at the end of the day, it's a part of the community that says we are going to take some responsibility for this, and that is going to be the best way to connect these people to the community, and that connection in turn is going to allow them to flourish, and whatever the other words you used. And I happen to believe, I've got 9 seconds left, I don't have time to talk about it, but the most important thing we can be doing is to make sure those people get employed, because that is going to allow them to have the self-respect and the means of having a job.
Now you've got another 2.5 minutes to keep going.
Well, we know that there are countries that are terrible in their human rights record. And we need to work with the people, lawyers here, for example, that helped bring those refugees into this country. And we need to, once they're in this country, let's make sure they have good settlement service, good health care, good counseling support, good introduction in the community. There are many organizations out there in the community supporting them. However, they need a lot of support also. And the city can play a role in bringing people together and providing a little bit of funding support. And no is not be all and all, but we have to do it. The other thing is this. Recently, there's been a cut in the federal government to say that if you're refugees, you may not get health care. I am against that. I think it's important that some of the healthcare clinic here in the city, that we don't care who you are. If you need health care, we will support you. Some of them may be from the LGBTQ community, especially from refugees.
John, you wanted to build on your initial comments.
Just to say that I think we have to broaden out, given that there are people fleeing persecution in particular who are LGBTQ coming from countries where they have good reason to be fleeing and coming here, and we admit them here, that I think we have to broaden out the community support. I think that some of the organizations that are helping people who are coming here as refugees for that reason are pretty narrow and small in number. And I think we have to, again, go out to the rest of the community and say, these are people who are refugees the same as others. They're just coming for perhaps a slightly different reason related to sexual orientation. I look at, we were talking a little bit at lunchtime today, Olivia mentioned it, and I was very involved in it too back at the time, of the boat people coming here and the degree to which the community stepped up, all kinds of religious organizations and community organizations to accept those people who today are making gigantic contributions in every respect to this country. I think is an example that we should be following again when it comes to people coming into the country as refugees, the particular group we're talking about, or any others.
I want to give one more example that I think from time to time the community and the mayor or the city councilor need to speak out. There have been examples where refugees from Nicaragua, for example, were turned down in the refugees board, and apparently he wasn't gay enough. And I think it was important that, yes, that is actually true, that we need to speak out to support some of the people that are seeking refugee status. If they are not successful, the community will have to come together and say, yes, please allow this person to stay in Canada.
Now I would like to ask John Clifford, who I can assure you is fully gay.
How do you know?
He doesn't really know.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
So what we're going to do is we had planned to pick 2 numbers, but we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. So, and we're so grateful that you all are here tonight that we've picked 3 numbers. And so we're going to have 3 questions from the audience, and in no particular order. Whoever has 173012, would you put your hand up? 173012.
Pick again.
All right. 229020. 229020.
Bingo. No. You have to pick again.
All right. 229031.
Oh, there's.
Oh, there we go. All right, over here. And which number do you have? 229031. Great.
We have someone up here, so they can say.
Okay.
Thank you. My name's Arthur Lamb, and at this point, I kind of wish I won the lottery, but this is a great opportunity. So thank you very much for Olivia and John and Jaime for being here to address the community's questions. I think, from my perspective, I wonder, in terms of, I think we've done a really good job from in the business, in the private sector world, to try to be more inclusive and try to be enable people to feel empowered to come out to within the workplace. I'm just wondering, from your respective perspective, what are your thoughts on encouraging not only just employees being out there, but also business leaders who happen to be gay, for them to come out as well?
I mean, that's a very difficult question because I think it is such a personal decision. I learned about that because I went with a young friend. It has a funny aspect to it in a certain way, but I went with a young friend to support him at 519 because he asked me to go with him to attend a support group. And I was the leader of the opposition at Queen's Park at the time. And when I walked in the room with him, the look on the faces of all the people there, because I think they thought I was showing up to come out, but
There's still time.
There's still hope. There's still hope.
I'm running out. Barb is here, but there's also a man in this room who once told me if I was in the room for 5 minutes alone with him, he could make me. I wasn't sure what it meant, but in all seriousness, I think that whether it's public figures, whether it's business leaders, whether it's athletes, it's an incredibly personal decision. And as we've seen with athletes, it's going to take somebody that has the courage to decide to do it, and it's not going to come about because we have a program or because anything like that. It's going to take somebody that has the courage. Then others will follow because they'll see that the consequence to it is nothing but praise and acceptance. But I can't answer better than that.
Olivia.
Well, there's this fabulous organization called Pride at Work. I hope all of you will join it. It's Celebrate Workplace Pride and have wonderful activities, different speaker series, etc. So encouraging people to join an organization like that will give them, saying, oh, lots of people are doing it, I can do it too. In the mid-90s, I remember at the time, the Metro Council, which is police and ambulance workers, TDC workers, they don't have, if you have same-sex spouse, you wouldn't get the benefits. And I fought hard and was able to win the fight at Metro Council so that there's equal benefits no matter who you are, who you're married to. Marriage, it was before marriage, your lover. And these kind of programs would encourage people to come out to say that, yeah, if there's equal, right now, thank God we have equal benefits, but that's the kind of things that you can actually push to have more people coming out.
2.5 minutes to build on that. John.
I don't think there's going to be much debating between Olivia and myself here. I'll speak only for myself in that regard. But those programs, of course, are terrific, and they have led to what I talked about earlier, which is the establishment inside many of the major corporations of both a kind of safe space, but also just a feeling inside the corporation as a whole that people can be out and be accepted and embraced as employees and as team members. I think it is not going to solve the problem that was asked about, though, which is for leaders of these corporations, CEOs and so forth. They're going to have to make the same individual decision. And I will tell you, I mean, that going to that support group was one of the most interesting nights of my life, and I've had a very interesting life, because I listened to young men, probably 20 of them sitting there, talking about, in their own context, both at work and at home, more particularly at home, described the challenges that they faced in making that decision. And I came away with a much better understanding of how profoundly difficult it is. And so I wouldn't presume, whether it's an athlete or a politician or a leader, to sort of say, well, that they should be going to these groups or shouldn't be going or should be coming out or not coming out. To me, it's an absolutely personal decision. All you want to do is create an environment in which they feel that they, if the time comes, that they will be sort of accepted and embraced for that decision.
Going back to that, Olivia?
At City Hall, I went to a lot of the Pride flag raising. I was there when we had the one that was at World Pride. And certainly, as a mayor, I will be there proudly to raise the flag. How does it connect? But here's an idea. Why don't we invite the top CEOs, big company or small, have a reception at City Hall with these big companies, and that was sent while we're raising the flag, or during raising a flag, or before or after, because that would send a message to their employee that the CEO of the company are there to raise flags, certainly that they too will feel more comfortable in coming out. I think that's one concrete idea that we can try, and maybe it'll send the signal, fear not, come on out, it's fine, it's okay. So that's another idea.
Where's our next question? Okay, go ahead.
How do you feel about choir marching in our Pride parades, and will you continue to fund Pride if they do?
Olivia's first.
This question was raised in the afternoon today. My answer is the same as it is. The City of Toronto had a human rights policy, and there was a process that was that I think even Brent Hawkes was involved in it, with dispute resolution between the Pride Parade and any organizations that wanted to march or there was any problem. And also, the process went through City Hall, and the City Hall said, both the solicitor and the city manager said that it was not breaking any law, it was not hate, and under Canada's freedom of speech, the Canadian law, that they can march with the Pride Parade. As a result, the Pride Parade got the funding, the city funding, and I fully support that decision.
John.
Well, I want to begin by acknowledging the incredible importance of Pride to Toronto and my strong, long-standing support for it. It needs to thrive going forward, and it needs to have the city funding. And I also am a believer that free speech is important. However, I believe that we should be looking, if the legal opinion that was rendered at the time was that the use of the phrase Israeli apartheid is something that was not in violation of the city's human rights policy, then I think we should be changing that policy. And as far as I'm concerned, we should change it to say any organization of any kind or any publicly funded parade that uses those words should not receive that funding. I mean, I will tell you, because I will tell you that if there was a parade put on by the Jewish community that included somewhere in its ranks a group of people who were virulently anti-gay, I would say the same thing. I would say that I would withdraw that public funding. And so, but if the policy is such that it doesn't permit for the funding to be withdrawn because it's complicit with the current policy, then I would change the policy and say if you use those words, any organization at all, then you shouldn't get the funding.
I suspect we'll have some debate on this. 2.5 minutes to continue the debate.
Well, we live in a country that celebrates democracy. And Israel is a democratic country, and so is Canada. And I think it's important that if the experts, in this case, both the city solicitor and the city manager, said very clearly that no law has been broken, then we have to trust the expert's opinion. That is their legal opinion, right? So if no laws are being broken and they do not define it as hate, if that is the case, then whether we agree with them or not, they have every right to exercise their point of view. So I don't understand why we would revisit this decision. And it was a very divisive discussion in the community in 2011, 2012. And then now there is finally some resolution. I think it's important that that decision is made by City of Toronto. And I can't imagine what message would be if Pride, this is World Pride, remember 2014 this year, that if they lost their funding, what message are we sending out to the Pride organizers? And that's just not fair.
I just believe that sometimes you have to take a stand on these things. And there was a motion put in front of the City Executive Committee as part of this decision-making process you talked about, Olivia, that said that in light of the purposes of the grant policy and community complaints, Council should give specific direction for the imposition of a condition of funding for the 2013 Pride event, in this case, that the term Israeli apartheid not be permitted to be used as part of the event. And I think if you simply change the policy and thereby said that no lawyer is going to say that it's not specifically mentioned or give a legal interpretation, I just happen to believe that in a city, and this is what we were talking about at lunchtime today in front of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, in a city that says that it prides itself on embracing diversity and that we don't believe people should be going around spewing hateful kind of language and expressions and so on, then we should be saying in our policies that kind of language is not going to be supported by public funding. It is inconsistent to do that.
All right, last question from the audience. Who's got number 229025? 229025, right here.
The mic is coming.
I have one question for you for the LGBT community, for those that are 29 and older, up to the 45. We have just found out that there are no programmings for those that are 29 or older. Everybody who turns 30 has to drop out of the programmings that are available for them. How will you guys solve this problem?
Is it fair? Is it fair?
John, it's of course, John.
I mean, just I don't know what kind of programs you're talking about that would stop at age 30. It seems like an odd sort of.
There's the Monday night program for soy, and there's the GEL program that both shut off at the age of 30.
And who are these operated by?
For people that are in the LGBT community, it's a space that they can go to be themselves, to have a free meal, entertainment, game night. Like this past Monday, we just had talent night. And as of 4 years from now, I will be dropping out of this program, but there is no programming for me to go after. How will this be solved?
And who are the I'm sorry to ask you questions, but who are the programs operated by?
The Monday night drop-in is run by the Sherborne Health Clinic, and the EGAL program, I don't know who that is run by.
Oh, EGAL.
It'd be EGAL. So
I mean, these are, am I first?
Yes.
Yeah.
These are, to some extent or another, publicly funded programs, and I would have said that just as we don't allow, discrimination, I would say, fine, if they're programs for children, then obviously there has to be a cutoff point at some point, but these are programs for adults, and I have no idea why they would be cutting people off at age 30. So I would say if they're receiving public funding, we should be going and having a discussion with them about how they have to service all people that fall within what you might call a non-youth, non-senior adult, if that's even an appropriate distinction at all. I don't understand why they would do that, aside from perhaps capacity issues, but even that's not the right way to decide who gets in and who doesn't. So I'm very sympathetic to what you say. I just don't know enough about it to know why they're doing this or know how you could remedy it, other than to say it's not acceptable to say 30 somehow becomes an arbitrary cutoff.
Olivia.
Knowing Soy and EGAL, it sounds like it's their youth program, and that the cutoff sometimes are at 30, not 24. And I think the community needs to think about that perhaps there's a need for organizations or activities for people that are over 30, and that don't call them youth organization. There are other definitions of youth that's up to 35, actually, for example. Maybe I'm still young, I don't know. So it's really the organization that's offering the programs, their decision. And some of them receive city grants. I think Soy does, for example. And if there is a demonstrated need that programs are needed for people that are over 30, I am sure that the community will establish it and apply for funding to various levels of government, and especially through United Way.
So I can just help. We have a little bit of a discussion about that question. Thanks so much for it. But just to reframe it slightly to say, one of the things I think we experience in our community is we have a number of programs that are started by the community based on different initiatives, but sometimes that results in a patchwork quilt. And that, I think that's what we're hearing about now. This patchwork quilt doesn't mean that everybody gets served according to their needs. So maybe in the 2.5 minutes we have to complete this question, maybe both of you could talk a little bit about what kind of a process would you put into place to make sure that that patchwork quilt was a little bit more comprehensive. Yeah. Is that a fair balance to your question?
That's a good question.
I think this is something that is not just limited to programs that may be of interest to LGBTQ people, but it applies to what goes on with youth employment or unemployment. It goes on in a number of areas. I mean, I think whether it's mental health, I mean, there's a whole lot of areas where I think one of the reasons we are not doing as effective a job as we can is because we have in those areas patchwork quilts. Now, that's not to say you have to have sort of one size fits all, one organization does everything, because in fact some of the beauty of having local organizations or individual programs is that they can be individualized, they can be customized to the way that people want them. But I think what often happens is a left-hand, right-hand thing where there is no effort to sort of take best practices, to see what works best, and to make sure there aren't people who are, as it were, falling between the cracks and just being left out entirely. So I just think it's a problem that is often endemic to government-funded programs in the nonprofit sector where they get the money and they get it on their own merit and they provide good programs, but nobody ever brings them together to say, well, look, are we doing the job for everybody here and doing the most effective job we can? And that's something I would want to change.
The City of Toronto have a grant officer, office actually. And what can happen is the officer in charge can bring the community together and bring all the service provider together and look at holistically what's being offered and what's missing and what needs to be changed. What can be done better when they come together? When they come together, they can partner together and maybe even be more effective in how they deliver the programs. And if that's, I would give that direction as a mayor to make sure that the community are connected and so that the services that's offered is not fragmented, so that people work together and no one would feel that they've been left behind and that somehow your wonderful birthday, 30, and then you lose all your friends and all your connections. That makes no sense. So I think we can certainly do a lot better by organizing these grants and all the services much better.
Olivia and John, you've told proudTOvote that you know our community well and that you strongly support us. Heck, you've even said some of your best friends are LGBT.
I said that.
Thank you for that. Our last question is about leadership. And John, you'll be first. You'll have 2 minutes to answer this. And then Olivia, you'll have 2 minutes. We won't have any debate. Our last question is about leadership. What leadership lessons have you learned from your LGBT friends and supporters? And how will these lessons shape your efforts as mayor to build a better Toronto, one that we can all truly be proud of?
I've learned that the LGBT community reached out to me, and they reached out to me long before I was a politician, actually. When I was just a community volunteer involved in different organizations, people came forward and sort of, when I say introduced themselves to me, they made it clear that they were people who were just not people who were friends or associates, but people who were advocates on behalf of the community. And so I've learned a lesson that whether you're the one that is trying to learn, which I think you always are if you're a leader in the community, or whether you're the one that's advocating, that you reach out. I think I learned myself about taking the first step. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I was trying to learn about some of the issues and so on, and somebody invited me to go to Woody's for a drink. Well, no, I'm serious about this point, because I wasn't sure when I walked in the place, and I'm being very honest with you, whether I would be accepted when I walked in there, because people would know that I was somebody who was in public life and was coming in there, and was I coming in to sort of collect information, or was I coming in? I was going in to listen and to learn and to make friends. And I think, but you have to make that first step to sort of reach out. I've learned in particular from most of the LGBT community about advocating firmly but rationally. Because I'm one of those people, I think you can tell from my public persona and what you see here in front of you tonight, that, and what you see is what you get, but I just believe the best way to advocate is firmly and without giving up, but rationally. I think when people start shouting and screaming and so on, you sort of lose the people that you're trying to advocate to, and I've learned that from this community, which I believe has so successfully advocated rationally but firmly, consistently for a long time. And of course, the last thing that I'll mention one more, which is of course never giving up. I mean, if you look at these issues and how they've evolved, even during my adult lifetime, it's been extraordinary, and it's been extraordinarily good, but it's been extraordinary, so you never give up. And then finally, I've learned that there's strength in partnerships, and it's something that I have learned in pretty well everything that I've done, that you can't do very much by yourself. You can do something by yourself, you can make a difference by yourself, but you can make a bigger difference if you're doing it in partnership with other people, and I think this community has proven that as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to stand up. I've learned 3 lessons, 3 values. Number 1, love. Number 2, courage. Number 3, celebrate. Talk about love. During the AIDS crisis, when people are dying and being sick, the community came together, and it was so loving in the support of each other. And that power of love was just phenomenal. That's how I learned what it means to really love, and how it can conquer the darkest nights, and through, and just when you come together, you feel that power of love, and that it can sometimes even conquer death. Courage, the courage to step forward and fearlessly say who you are, who we are together. And that sense of fearlessness and that courage taught me a whole lot, because I've seen Susan, which was George, came forward and stood her ground even when it was really difficult. And I've seen so many examples. Don Franco, who just stood his ground and spoke about who he is. And that sense of courage is amazing. And thirdly, I don't even need to describe it, fabulously amazing in terms of this celebratory spirit. Because if you don't celebrate success, you don't learn. And this is something about being able to celebrate together brings the sense of pride, and that is infectious. It brings people and say that, yeah, let's be proud together. Let's bring pride back at City Hall. Let's bring... I'm running out of time. Let's bring pride back to the mayor's office. Thank you very, very much.
Friends. Now, friends, that's the time we have for our debate today. Thank you so much for making the time on a Friday afternoon to be with us. These 2 candidates are going to be competing for a prize which is symbolized by the mayor's chain of office. Now, we're not able to really decide if they're going to get that chain of office or not, but we can give them the LGBTQ chain of office with... and